Hello, this is a brief tutorial on how to use a compound light microscope. As described in the notes, this is the most common type of microscope used, both in high school science labs, but also in professional settings as well. So we're going to go over the parts of the microscope and then review how to use the microscope properly. And this website that I'm showing you here is the same one that you're going to be using for your virtual lab activity, the 1.3 e-microscope lab. If you click at the bottom where it says microscope controls, it shows you all the parts of the microscope. So up top we have the eyepieces, which are also known as the ocular lenses. This is where obviously you're going to be looking into the microscope. This connects to the arm of the microscope, which holds up the eyepiece, and this part right here, which is known as the turret. Another name for this is the nose piece. This part rotates to click different lenses into place. These lenses are known as the objectives. The objectives allow for different levels of magnification in the microscope. Now, the objectives have a lens, but also it's important to note that the ocular lenses, the eyepieces, have a lens as well. So the eyepiece has a magnification factor of 10 times. So whatever objective you click into place is going to have its own magnification factor. So whatever the magnification factor of the objective is going to be, you multiply that by 10, and that's going to be the total magnification for the object that you're viewing. Now below the objectives, you have the stage. The stage is going to be where you're going to put your sample. And on this kind of microscope, in the microscopes we actually have in class, you have what is called a mechanical stage, which is this device right here, which allows you to move the sample around. And that is done by using the stage adjustment knobs underneath. Below the stage, there is what is called a condenser. This is a device which helps you focus the light. And then you have a diaphragm underneath that, which allows you to change the amount of light that's traveling through the condenser and through the stage. Then at the bottom, you're going to have some sort of light source, an illuminator. Today, those are usually LED light bulbs because they're relatively energy efficient and they're very, very bright. Obviously, you're going to have an on-off switch where you can turn on and off the light. And then you have two adjustment knobs. One is called the coarse adjustment knob, which adjusts the stage up and down a far distance. And then you have the fine adjustment knob that adjusts it a very short distance. Coarse adjustment knob is used to bring your object into focus, and then the fine adjustment knob is to bring it into crisp, clear detail. So if you click off of the microscope controls, we can actually practice the lab. So on this, you can click on the turret, the nose piece, the coarse adjustment and the fine adjustment, and then you can click on the stage knobs to adjust the location of your slide. So if you look on this website, you have a list of tasks at the bottom here that you're trying to complete. When you complete a task, it gives you a green check mark. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to complete the task, so don't worry too much about getting that green check mark, but it forces you to go through this list step by step because this is the proper way to operate a microscope, and it's going to walk you through how to operate it properly. So the first step here is to move the stage to its lower position. So if I click on the coarse adjustment knob and drag this down, it's going to move the stage downward. The reason why you do this is so that you have plenty of space to put your slide onto your stage. It also says next step is to turn on your illuminator, so you got to turn your light on. So now you can see things. A big mistake I often have students right at the beginning is they say, "Mr. Wassman, I can't see anything." And I walk over and flip the light switch. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see when things are dark. The next step is to select the 4 times objective. So if you click on the nose piece, also known as the turret, it is in the 4 times magnification factor. If you click on it, it's going to switch to 10 times and 40 times. So click on it so that the 4 times magnification factor is clicked into place. You always start on the lowest objective because this is going to be the easiest objective to get your object into focus. If you start on one of the higher objectives, it's going to be a lot harder to focus on because when you switch to higher objectives, essentially you're moving closer and closer and closer to the object. So if you imagine if you're looking at an object like right here versus right here, it's much harder to focus on something here versus focusing on something that is further away. So the closer you get to something, the harder it is to focus. So you always start in the lowest objective, get your object into focus, and then switch to the higher objectives. If your object gets too out of focus, then switch back to the low objective and start over. So we have it on our 4 times objective, and again, the objective has a 4 times magnification factor, and then the eyepiece has a 10 times magnification factor. So whatever we look at underneath the microscope is going to be 40 times larger than normal. So now we can actually select a slide. So if you click over here where it says Slide Library, it gives you a whole list of things you can look at. After we've gone through and practiced this a little bit, you can take a look at any of these slides to kind of practice using the microscope. But we're going to start right here with the letter E. So you click on that. And what this does is it puts basically a print of the letter E. So if we were to cut out a piece of newspaper and put the letter E on the slide, this is what we would be looking at. Now if you notice, it's not in very clear focus, nor is it positioned right. So first thing we want to do is we want to center the slide underneath the objective. So we're going to slide that up and down and click on the lower knob and kind of adjust it left to right. So we got it nice and centered. Now this one's really hard to get it to give you the green check mark, so don't worry if it doesn't actually do that when you're practicing the lab. The next thing you want to do is you want to click on the coarse adjustment knob and bring that up until your object is in focus. And it takes a little bit of time to practice this, and on your iPad you're going to have to slide your finger up and down, so you might have to adjust it a little bit. And then once you focus in a little bit more, you might need to readjust up and down and side to side to get your object right in the middle. Now something to note here, in this particular simulation, it doesn't show this very clearly, but anything you put underneath the microscope, the image that you see, your field of view, is going to be upside down and backwards. This is a nature of how light interacts with lenses. So when you put an object underneath, it's going to be flipped upside down and flipped backwards. Now here, the E looks right side up. To get that image under the microscope, you would have to put the slide upside down so the E would look right side up in the field of view. This is just something to note when using a microscope because it throws people off if you're not familiar with that. So now that we have a clear picture of the object here, the E, we start to notice something about it that we don't see on normal view. So if you're looking at the letter E just with your naked eye, you're not going to notice kind of these imperfections, this little wobbliness to the edges here. This is because the way that newsprint and the way that printers print out ink is they're laying down the ink in little splotches. So it's not necessarily a solid object. But when you look at it from a distance, when you look at it normally, it looks good enough because our eyes can't pick up this detail. But as you zoom in, you can start to see the little imperfections in the printing process. So in the lab and in the instructions here, it asks you to download your image, and you do that by clicking the download image button here. What that's going to do on your iPad is going to ask you to save it to your camera roll. Go ahead and do that because that's going to be part of your assignment when you get to that lab. The next thing it asks you to do is to switch to a higher objective. So to do that, of course, we're going to click on the nose piece, or also known as the turret, and then we're going to click to go to the 10 times magnification. So you always go in order. You go from low to medium to high. You can't skip because it's going to bring your object out of focus way too fast. So once you've switched to a higher objective, you want to only use the fine adjustment knob because the coarse adjustment knob is going to bring it out of focus way too fast. So you click on that fine adjustment knob, and if you slide it up and down, you'll notice it gets out of focus very, very quickly. But if you adjust it just slightly, you can get it to the point where you can see nice, crisp, clear detail. And on your screen, on your iPad, you might have to play around with it a little bit to get it nice and clear, like that. Okay. Again, when you get closer and closer to this image, you're going to see the little imperfections that you don't notice on a normal basis. So you can see that the way that the ink was like printed on the paper, it doesn't make a perfectly straight line. So once you have a clear image here, and you can adjust again left or right or up and down so you can see different parts of that letter, the next step is going to be download this 10 times magnification image. And then finally, you can click and switch to the highest objective here. So a 40 times magnification, so that's 40 times 10 for your eyepiece, and that's going to give you a 400 times magnification factor. So this image is 400 times bigger than it would be normally. And again, when you're on these higher objectives, you only want to adjust with the fine adjustment knob. And it's going to take a little bit of patience to get it nice and crisp and clear. But here you can see basically little specks of ink that were basically thrown at the paper in the printing process. Now we don't see this because our eyes are just not acute enough, but underneath a microscope you can reveal details that you normally wouldn't be able to see. In your lab you're going to download this picture as well, and then answer some questions based on how to operate the microscope and microscopes in general. So hopefully this tutorial helps. Once you're done with the E portion of the lab, feel free to click on that slide library and take a look at some of the other samples that they have. There are some really interesting things you can look at.